There is one incredibly important addition that you need to make to all of your characters. And no, I'm not talking about calcium phosphate, although it is an anti-clumping agent that will keep your characters from sticking together. Although if you're writing erotica, you do want them to stick together. No, today we're talking about character agency. Agency is one of the most important aspects of writing good characters, especially main characters. For most stories and most main characters, you want them to have a strong degree of agency. I'll be getting to a definition of character agency in a second, but we tend to think about character agency in a positive way. When people speak about character agency, they often mean positive character agency. In this video, I want to talk about the difference between positive and negative character agency and how when people bring up characters who apparently lack agency, they often are referring to characters that have negative agency. Let's start with a definition of character agency. There's two broad elements that fit into this concept. Character agency is defined by the character moving towards the goals that they have. A character who takes action in pursuit of a goal is said to have agency. They are not passive, they are not waiting around for stuff to happen to them. Agency is about choices, it's about goals, it's about movement and attempts to fulfill those goals. That's the first part. The second part is effect on the plot. A character with agency does things that move the plot in a certain direction, usually related to part one where they're in pursuit of their goals, and as an effect of this, the plot is affected by those actions. I would also perhaps broaden the second part of that definition to include any attempted effects on the plot. You can have a character try to do something and fail, or they try to influence the plot but are overcome by other forces. It's the attempt and the intention and the pursuit of goals that matters as far as character agency is concerned. Although you probably want to avoid situations where all of the actions that the character takes fail and they fail to have any sort of effect on the plot. If you can completely remove a character, especially a main character, from a story and everything would play out exactly the same, that's not a great thing to happen. That can create a rather large plot hole. Character agency is important for writing good characters, as this proactivity and movement in pursuit of goals generally results in a more interesting and engaging character. These are the characters that readers want to read about. Now, I can hear you writing out a comment about some story or some novel that has a character who appears to lack agency and are using this as proof that agency actually isn't that important and it's not something that you need. And this brings up the main point that I want to discuss in this video, which is the difference between positive character agency and negative character agency. And how when we talk about characters lacking agency, it's often a case where they actually have negative agency, not a complete lack of agency. Typically, when we describe a character who lacks agency, they look like a sort of bystander in the story, that they aren't taking any action, that they aren't moving towards their goals. This is what I would describe as negative agency. When the character has made a decision, they've made a choice not to pursue their goals. They are avoiding taking actions that would affect the plot in the way that they ultimately want. They are avoiding pursuing the goals that they actually have. Doing nothing is a choice, oftentimes. Sometimes it's forced upon a character for whatever reason. But if a character does nothing, then they are ultimately making a choice. Oftentimes, the stories that center around a character who lacks agency aren't about the character actually lacking agency. They're about the character having negative agency, which is a choice that moves away from their goals. Some examples of this, Adam Trask from East of Eden does this a lot. He often is blind and sort of naive to how some other characters actually are. He goes into this very long sort of depression after, let's just say, a really unpleasant divorce. A lot of what drives that character is movement away or refusal to move towards his goals. The main character in The Count of Monte Cristo, who I guess is the Count of Monte Cristo, goes through this same sort of thing during the first part of his time in prison. And actually, at one point, I think he laments the fact that he's wasted several years just sort of wallowing in despair and not trying to actually do anything. You'll also see this in some plot structures like the hero's journey, where there's the stage of the hero's journey called the refusal. The refusal is really a moment of negative character agency. There is an action that the character could take, but they are initially unwilling to do that. They are unwilling to take action. They make the choice not to move towards their goals. These are characters who deep down do have goals. They have agency, but because of whatever reason, they are not pursuing their goals. One important feature of this is that the character's negative agency, their lack of action, still has an effect on the plot. Usually a negative effect because they need to take action to solve the conflict but are refusing to do so. This is what separates a character who has no agency from a character with negative agency. Negative agency means that the character has something that they could take action on, there could be an effect that they could have, and that their inaction is negatively affecting the plot. That's not the same thing as a character lacking agency completely. A lack of agency either means you have a poorly developed character or a character who just doesn't fit the plot at all, a character who has no earthly business being there. Poorly developed characters lack goals and motivations, which, as we talked about earlier, is one of the important points for character agency. They don't have anything that drives them into action. There's nothing for them to do because they don't want anything because they're underdeveloped. A character who doesn't fit the plot can also have a lack of agency. If they don't slot into the machine of your plot, then they won't have a role to play and therefore will have no agency because they're not going to have an effect on anything. That's when a character who has no goals or doesn't take action becomes problematic. The choice to not act needs to have consequences on the plot or the world around the character in some way. You can get away with a character not taking action provided there are consequences to that. Moving to a point of being able to take action can be a part of a character's arc, and that's often what these stories sort of revolve around. You have to be careful with this because a character sitting around for too long not taking action when the reader really wants them to take action, and they know that the character needs to take action to achieve their goals, and they know that probably the character will take action at some point because this is a story that they're reading. If that goes on for too long, if there isn't progress in the direction of more positive agency, that can get really annoying and can turn readers off, but it is something that you can do. There's all sorts of stories that do this. Having a character move from a lack of proactivity and negative agency into a more proactive mindset with more positive agency where they finally get off their ass and tackle the problems of the plot, that can be a very effective way to use negative agency. Speaking of negative things, this video is coming to an end. Wait, is it negative that the video is over, or is the video the negative thing that's coming towards the end? Anyway, I'd love to hear what you think about this in the comments down below if you have the positive agency to make a comment. If you want to see more stuff like this, you can check out all my other writing advice related videos and subscribe to my channel. As always, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.